Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining again this week for our second session in our seminar on technology called "How in the World Do We Live in a Tech World?" And last week we talked a little bit about a theology of technology and how really we have to look all the way back from the beginning of the Bible to see how God started allowing people to use raw materials and to organize them in such a way as to be useful for human purposes. And so we looked at that. We were reminded that God is sovereign over technology, that most clearly we see that through the tool that was created to execute criminals, the Roman cross, and how the Lord used in his sovereignty that technological method to be the means through which Jesus would die a substitutionary death, atoning sacrifice on that Roman cross for our sin. And so, but we talked about some of the implications of that being that it's very foolish for us to think that technology doesn't change us. It does, maybe for the good, maybe for the bad, but it certainly is shaping us and changing us. And so tonight we're going to continue talking about how technology changes us. And specifically, we're going to talk about our phones. We mentioned last week when we were talking through some of the different technologies that the most significant technological um, advance, um, invention, if you will, over the last 20 years has definitely been the iPhone, and really all of smartphones flowing from that. And so we have to realize that phones change us. And that's the title of our seminar, our session tonight. Our phones are changing us. We have to recognize that. And I think as we go through some of the ways our phones change us, maybe you, like me, when I was putting this together, thought, yeah, that's true in my life, or we can see how that's true at different points related to our phones. And I mean, the truth is, maybe some of you, maybe all of you, are watching this seminar on your phones. And so we're grateful for technology, especially in periods like we are now where we can't be meeting in person. And so um, our phones are changing us in all kinds of different ways, good and bad. And so we're going to be looking at some of those tonight. But first of all, just by way of um, introduction, listen to these statistics: 81,500 times per year, 6,791 times per month, 226 times per day, one time every 4 minutes of our waking lives, we do what? We check our phones. Now, maybe a few years ago, this was true of teenagers or um, millennials or things like that. Now, this is pretty much caught up with everyone. Everyone that has a smartphone checks their smartphone a lot. And of course, these are averages, right? I mean, um, maybe you don't check your phone every 4 minutes, but I think there are quite a few reasons as to why this is true. Um, Maybe most importantly, our phones have really centralized lots of different things in our lives. I mean, you think about you use it for your camera, you use it as a phone, You use it for your social media. You use it to buy groceries. You use it to text and communicate with your spouse or your friends. You use it to research um, new cars. I mean, we use our phones for so many different things. I think that's a little bit of the explanation. It's become just so central, a central piece of equipment that can do so many different things. I mean, from time to time, I'll do my Bible reading or at least some Bible reading through my phones or looking up some different commentaries. And so we use our phones a lot for a lot of different things. But the truth is that our smartphones amplify the most unnecessary distractions as well. Um, Things that are really not that useful to us. Now, we've just listed lots of things that are useful, but our phones allow in and amplify things that are not important. They're just distractions. And in doing so, that can deaden us to the most significant and important things. Our relationship with the Lord, needs of our family, needs of our neighbors, because we're so caught up in the distractions that come alongside having a phone and having so much information. And so we have to recognize these things are true about our phones. Um, but one of the ways I think that our phones change us in a bad way is that we start to devalue people. Um, think about it for a moment. We know the statistics related to how dangerous it is to text and drive. I mean, lots of states, maybe by now, I'm not sure, every state has made it illegal. At least some states have made it illegal to text and drive. And yet, when you're driving down the road and you are checking lanes beside you and you look over in the lane beside you, what are people doing? They're texting, they're looking at their phones. It's dangerous. Everybody knows that. But this pull, um, this need, this felt need to get things done or to communicate or to not miss something is more important than the needs of those around me, like their safety. And so, in that way, I mean, how tragic is that? That my desire to keep up with things in a moment by moment basis or to communicate something at this very moment, um, I'm willing to put others' lives literally on the line to do so. And so that's just one example, but I think it's a good one about how this pull, this, and of course, it's not the phone itself, it's everything that comes with the phone, but um, it causes us to think less about the needs of others and how we relate to others around us. And so we have to recognize that. But also think about it from this perspective. Think about what we call social feedback loops. So we'll use the example of, say, social media. I post something on social media. I have a group of people who hear, who listen, who see what I post. And then my expectation is that I get positive feedback from that social media post. Um, and so, what happens if um, I want to get lots of positive feedback? Well, I begin to congregate with people who are likely to give me positive feedback, people who feed me what I want to hear. And so we generally have a way through our phones to find this group of people who are like us, who think like us, and who agree with us. And we can be very connected to that group of people, but I'm not sure that that's always a good thing for us. Um, there are times when we don't need people in our lives saying, yes, that's right, like. We need people in our lives saying, hold on a second, what about this perspective? And so in a few minutes, we'll talk about what happens sometimes when we get some of that pushback on social media or through our phones. And um, that can be ugly as well. But in doing that, and for the sake of this way our phone is changing us, think about it from that perspective that now I'm seeking to congregate with people who give me what I want, which is positive feedback. Therefore, I'm devaluing people who may have another perspective, people who may think differently than me on certain things. And that's not always a positive thing either. Okay, another way our phones change us is they feed into us this desire to have immediate approval. Um, Here's a question. Do you ever find yourself trying to impress people? Probably, if we were all being honest, at some point we would say, yeah, I mean, we want people to like us. We want people to think well of us. And so what do we do because we have that desire? How does that affect what we do? And so I think that all these things can look a little bit different, but it really begins, like I said, with a subtle desire for people to like us. So I can post a picture or I can send a text. How fast do I get these likes or thumbs up? And what do we do after we post those things or after we send that text? We often find ourselves going back to that post, to that text, to see how many people have liked this, because we want people to like us. And so we start to crave this immediate approval from other people. So then the question is this: what happens when we don't get those likes? What happens when we don't get that immediate approval that we're looking for? Well, then we're tempted to be led to believe that people don't think we're very impressive. So we have to step up our game a little bit, or we have to do things a little bit different, or we have to find a group of people who will give us those likes, and we push those other people to the side. And so you can see how these things start to really affect the way that we view, the way that we think about other people, and how we are really seeking their approval. You know, in Galatians chapter 1, Paul talks about this specifically. And obviously, in that context, he was talking about preaching the gospel. And for the Galatians, they were getting caught up in this lie of adding to the gospel. And so Paul says it straight up. I think it's Galatians 1:10. You can check me on that. Let me just check myself real quick. Galatians chapter 1, yeah, verse 10. He says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." And so, look, this craving that's created in us for immediate approval from man, is not from God. That's wrong. That's from Satan. That's sin. That's a bad desire. That is not Christ-like. And so we need to push those things away and understand how these things are changing us. Is this true in my life? When I post something, when I send something, and obviously it's an attitude of the heart. It's what is my motivation behind this? And a lot of these things go back to that key point of motivation and thinking through these things. Okay, another way our phones are changing us is that we're losing literacy. Um, reading on our phones trains us to skim quickly, right? There's so much information. So we're learning to pick up quickly on things that we think are important, information that we think is key for us. So we skim a lot of information and we try to pick out those things. And so our phones are kind of training us in that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But what can be bad is that it can lead us to lose our ability to concentrate on something, on a text or a story for extended period of time. And this was one for me that I've, I really noticed. I really felt like, yes, I think this is having an effect on me. Because I mentioned this in one of our weekly Wednesday encouragements a couple weeks ago, but from time to time, I find myself reading my Bible or reading a book, a commentary, whatever. And literally, it's almost like a struggle for me to read more than a couple verses, 10 verses, without my mind sort of checking out and going somewhere else. And I've always maybe struggled with that a little bit, but I don't remember it being as much of a struggle as it seems to be now. And I don't want to blame a smartphone and for all of that. I'm not sure, but I think there is some truth in that we're being trained to not spend so much time on one thing. Don't concentrate, just kind of skim through. And if we're not careful, that can affect the way we study our Bibles. And that's what these next couple things. I mean, why is this detrimental to our spiritual health? Well, I mean, put simply, our faith, our standard of truth is a book, right? It's the Bible. And so if we can't focus to study, if we're losing the literacy skills needed to have deep concentration and study to really dive into God's word, we need to push that away. We need to make sure and that we're not being taught in a bad way this inability to concentrate and to focus. And so I wonder, maybe in my life, since this was one of the things I find myself struggling with, maybe I have a fast from my phone, or I limit very strictly time on my phone for an extended period of time and see if that helps with my levels of concentration and focus as it relates to those things. And so we're losing literacy as a result of our phones as well. Okay, another way our phones change us is that we feed on production. We're constantly wanting to produce content. And so one thing you could think of is what celebrities, maybe not celebrities, maybe it's what pastors, what people do you find interesting that you read, you watch, you want to learn about. And I mean, current people, what makes them so interesting? They're constantly allowing you to see into their life. And here's the way this can affect our lives. Would it make you uncomfortable to have a really fun day and a really awesome experience and not be able to post a picture of it online? Or not to take a picture of it so that you can text your friends, or for some of you younger folks, like Snapchat your friends, or whatever all of those things are. Can you, in other words, can you be in a moment and enjoy the moment without feeling the need to produce content related to that moment? This is what we're talking about. Some have said that our desire to photograph our most powerful experience may dull the actual experience in our memory of it. And so, look, I'm grateful that we have a device that I'm able to snap pictures, to look back on, and to reflect on, and to have memories of certain things. But if I'm so caught up in looking through life through a lens or through a screen to take a picture, then the truth is I can't really experience those things. I can't really experience relationship if I'm constantly looking for opportunities to take selfies. I can't experience God's creation in its fullest if my thought process is constantly what angle makes the best picture so that my Instagram posts look the best or whatever those things may be. And so we have to be careful about these things as well because they can be detrimental to our relationships and our ability to reflect deeply on the experiences that we're having on a daily basis. One quote, one lady actually says it like this: compulsive social media habits are a bad trade. Your present moment in exchange for an endless series of someone else's past moments. I mean, now this is applied specifically to social media, but the truth is this, right? We can be so consumed with scrolling to keep up with what everybody's consuming, or I'm sorry, producing on their feeds, that we can't experience what's going on around us right now. And from this author's perspective, that's a bad trade. Our present moments are being lost. We're not able to speak into people's life and have experiences with other people and really dive into these things because we're trading that for an endless series of someone else's moments that have already occurred in the past. And now you're reflecting and you're seeing and you're trying to keep up on. And so we have to be careful and recognize that if our phones lure us in to this temptation to feed on things that are produced and really judge experiences by how they're able to produce content for us to put out there. Okay. The next way our phones change us is that we become what we like. And this little graphic on the screen is clear to us. We know what that thumbs up sign means. But the truth is that we really become what we like. In other words, things that are appealing to us, things that we like, not just post on social media and the text that people send us, but what consumes us, things that are attractive to us, things that we dwell on. But maybe we are beginning to dwell on things that we never knew we wanted until they were presented to us. Then we begin to like them. We begin to have this desire for them. And so we have to be careful. I mean, what is something that a lot of guys in your group of friends wear? Brand, style. This is the way brands and styles work, right? People see other people wearing this. They notice it for the first time, or they see it in a store for the first time, and that's something that they like. Then what do? They go out, they purchase that, and they put it on themselves. And this can happen to us through a screen as well. When we look at something, when we constantly expose ourselves to what is out there, things that maybe we don't need, maybe are straight up sinful and bad, but even good things as well, they begin to consume so much of our time and attention that it starts being this constant process of trying to be something else. We're constantly trying to become something else to the point that we're never content with where we are or who we are. And I think this is something we really see on social media. Where, I mean, we're so exposed to other people's lives that the temptation can be, I'm not content with where the Lord has me because I want to be like this person, or when I want to have those experiences that they have. I want to do the things that they're doing. I want to live like they're living. What can I do to become like that? So it's this constant rat race, I think that leads to the next point real very clearly. Isn't it amazing that because of this device, we're the most connected people that have ever lived in the world? I mean, literally, we can I can FaceTime right now one of my really good friends in India. And yeah, what, it's 8 o'clock here, so it's 8 o'clock in the morning there. And in real time, we can talk. And I mean, we're so connected. We can connect with friends that go back for decades that we haven't talked to um, face to face or physically talk to them in forever, but we're connected with everybody. But statistics say now um, we're more lonely people than we've ever been. So the irony of the fact that we're so connected and yet we're so alone, or at least we feel we're so alone. I think here's why: because we use our smartphones for what's called semi-personal interactions through apps, or we use this to simply block the world out from us. And so, on one hand, we're lulled into thinking we're so connected. And yet, the truth is, you can't really connect with people through a screen. Now, it can be helpful, especially if there are extenuating circumstances. I mean, we have some friends. He's deployed in Afghanistan. Look, I'm grateful that they can have something, but trust me, they will be the first to tell you the relationship is not the same. It can't be. That's not how God has created relationships. And so we need that physical interaction. We need that physical proximity to one another in order to pursue relationship as God intended. So on one side, we can be lulled into thinking that we have lots of friends, a lot in, and Facebook calls them that, right? We have this list of lots of friends and lots of people that we follow on Twitter and lots of people who like our stuff on Instagram and all these things. And yet, how many really true relationships do we actually have? It's not even a fraction of the amount of our friend list. And so we can be lulled into thinking we're well connected when we're not really well connected in the personal relationships like God has intended us to be. The other side of that is that this allows us to block people out of our lives, right? I mean, you've seen it, I've seen it. Maybe we've even been guilty of it. There, you go to a restaurant, you see a couple on a date, and what are they doing? They're not talking to one another. They're not engaging one another in conversation. Both of them are like this. And so the truth is, maybe we feel lonely because this pushes people away from us. If we want to check out of a conversation, if we want to check out of a relationship, if we feel the tug to keep up with what news is going on in the world by a minute, then I can totally ignore this relationship and push you away and pursue what I want through this. And so maybe that's another factor. And this point says that smartphones make for easy social shields. We don't have to talk in elevators, on buses, when we're walking down the street, or even to our closest friends when we don't feel like it. We don't have to talk. If we'll just pick this up, turn it on, look down, stay engaged with this, that'll tell everybody else around us, please leave me alone. And we do that, right? We're guilty of that. And what that's doing is that's pushing away. That's making us more lonely. And so, look, I would say this, toward the end, we're going to talk about some practical applications and implications. But look, if you maybe struggle with some sense of loneliness, maybe more than that, maybe you struggle with depression, anxiety, those types of things, look, put the phone away. Limit yourself to certain times. Hold yourself to that. Focus on real, personal, physical relationships. Now, in these days, we got to have 6 feet, right? But that's better than through a screen. And so focus on those things and see if that helps, what that looks like. John Piper um, talks about how the distraction, the temptation, the luring works, and he gives a few examples. One example he talks about is novelty candy, something new and shiny. We want to know what's new in the world and among our friends, and we don't want to miss out. So this becomes attractive because we can get that. Number 2, ego candy. We want to know what people are saying about us. We talked about this, how quickly they're liking, how quickly they're commenting, how quickly they're giving us positive feedback to the things that we're posting, and that's to build up our ego. That's a lure there. It's a temptation there. Entertainment candy. We want to be fascinated, impressed, weirded out, or shocked. And the Lord knows that there's plenty of opportunity for that through our smartphones. Also, through this, we can avoid boredom. If we want to put off the day ahead, especially if what's going on is boring or routine, we can spend hours and hours looking at random videos on YouTube. Right there, it's easy. Pull it out, YouTube videos, whatever. I'm scrolling. We're bored. Responsibility. Here's the next one. How about when things get hard, we put them off and we go to this. We delay. We procrastinate so that this allows us to escape responsibility. And what a shame. Something that's hard, something that's difficult, a conflict, a pain, a disability of our body. This allows us to escape those things instead of really. And so we have to realize the constant pull, these things are real and they're happening. Another way our phones can change us is it can cause us to be comfortable in our sin. There's been no tool more profitable by the pornography business than access 24/7 in the hands of the majority of our country right here. Sin is easily accessible, and it's not just pornography. Affairs, adultery, many, a lot, maybe most have started through communication and the ease of communication and the ability to communicate in ways that can be easily hidden and put down. And so a couple of safeguard questions I think that are wise for us. Am I safeguarding myself? For those of us who are married, do we have safeguards on our phone? Do we give each other passwords? Do we have the ability, do we keep our phones in as much as possible public areas and all of those things? We don't have time. We're not going to go into all that today. We will next week talk more about some of these safeguards. But the question is, if you're not safeguarding yourself, you're living foolishly as it relates to your content here. And the second question is, am I simultaneously seeking to satisfy my heart with divine glory, even if it is for now invisible? In other words, look, this world doesn't have anything that can satisfy us. That can only come from the Lord. And unfortunately, this leads us to this constant dissatisfaction instead of being thankful, instead of pursuing what the Lord wants. And that's certainly a sin. Discontentment, not being thankful, um, presuming upon the Lord, always wanting more instead of being content with where we are. Also, we're losing meaning the way our phone changes us. Think about the quantity of needless information that comes into our lives. Just, we are bombarded with information. And sometimes it's so much that we're kind of left with this sense of what in the world is really going on? What am I supposed to be doing? It's just so much information overall. Look at this, the average output of email and social media text is estimated at 3.6 trillion words per day, or about 36 million books typed out. 36 million books worth of content is typed out every day through text messages, email and social media. And we're consuming that constant flow of text, and that's affecting us and the value of those things. Lamentations 3:22 says, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. And so you think about this. Do you think, or do we think, that an unhealthy desire to stay current, to stay up to speed on all this information could actually be preventing us from experiencing the timelessness of God, the never ceasing nature, eternality of God? I think so, and we have to recognize these things. We talked about this, the fear of missing out on something. Did you know that there's a new entry into the Oxford Dictionary? FOMO, FOMO, the fear of missing out. And the definition is, it's an anxiety that an exciting or interesting event may be happening elsewhere, often aroused by posts seen on social media. So we're constantly fearing that something is going on here, and that if I don't access it, I'm going to miss out. Why does social media seem to be increasing our fear of missing out? Why does it hurt so much to feel left out? It's changing us. It's drawing us. It's this constant pull. And so hopefully by now you've recognized these things. Maybe you've had this experience. We become really harsh with people. We are tempted to say things through a screen that we would never say to another person in person. And look, that's terrible. That's bad. James chapter 4 talks about how we should live and how we should love and communicate with one another. James 4:11 says, don't speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. I mean, look, if we're speaking evil, and not just speaking evil things, but speaking in evil ways, we're in sin. We're wrong. And that includes text messages. That includes how we talk to our spouses in the midst of conflict. That includes how we talk to our families when there's a rub going on. We're tempted to say things over those screens that we would never say in person. That's wrong. That's sin. We have to recognize the temptation to do that and stop and not allow ourselves to go there. Okay. 9 diagnostic questions as we close. And lots of things here, but we'll just work through these quickly that I think can help us. And really, this is a recap of what we've already talked about. Do my smartphone habits expose an underlying addiction to entertainment, to amusing things? Does my smartphone habits reveal a compulsive desire to be seen and affirmed? Do my smartphone habits distract me from genuine focus and communion with God? Do these smartphone habits provide an escape from sober thinking about things that are important? The finite perspective on my life, the return of Christ, things that matter eternally. Do my smartphone habits preoccupy me with the pursuit of worldly success, pleasing others? Do these habits, do my smartphone habits neglect the sporadic leading of God's Spirit in my life? Do my smartphone habits build up those around me, my local church? Are they being used to build up or to tear down? Think about that. Do my smartphone habits center on what is necessary to me and beneficial to others? And do my smartphone habits disengage me from the needs of the neighbors God has placed right in front of me? My family, my community, my church family who may have needs, and we're so engaged in other things that we don't even see them. Okay, 6 applications, and then we're finished for tonight. Things to consider. Have a no phone Bible reading time on your schedule. Look, put the phone up. Read the Bible. I would even say, if you read the Bible on your phone for your devotional time, you may find it very helpful to stop doing that. The temptation to quickly check something. Oh, I just remembered I need to do that. And the temptation to stop what you're doing and do it right then is, so put your phone away. Maybe some of us need to go back to flip phones. I know that sounds crazy. But look, if these things are true and happening in our lives, maybe it would be best for us to say, look, I need a phone to call people and to text people, and that's pretty much it. I'm willing to do that for the sake of my spiritual growth. Maybe that's a question that we all need to ask. Are we willing to do that? Would you be willing to go to a flip phone, a basic phone that calls and texts for the sake of your sanctification? If really the truth is this, if you can't say yes to that, then that's further truth that you actually need to do that. So maybe you go back. Maybe it's deleting certain apps. Maybe there are things that take up too much time. There's so much of a draw and a temptation that what you need to do is just get rid of that app so that you don't even have that temptation, at least for a period of time, until you can become more disciplined in how to navigate those things. Maybe removing push notifications on your emails or other apps for that matter, so that there's not this constant barrage of messages popping up on your phone. And look, I'm sure we've had that experience where you're talking with somebody and a notification pops up. You can see it out of the corner of your eye. You don't want to check it because you don't want that other person to feel like that you're neglecting them. And yet at the same time, that draw is so, okay, what if this is, okay, I got to check it. Right? And so turn off some of those push notifications so that when you're with a person, when you're having conversations, or better yet, put your phone in your pocket. Put your phone away. Put your phone face down when you're engaging with people. Set a limit on how much you're going to check your emails a day, or your social media, or your Instagram, or whatever you're checking. Set time limits where you say, okay, here's when I have some breaks. I'm going to give myself 15 minutes at this point, and 15 minutes at this point. I'm going to limit myself to those things. And then I'm not going to constantly check all throughout the day all of these things. And then the last one is, many have found it wise to have a drawer, a counter, a basket in your house that all the phones go in during family hours, during family times, during times that we're wanting to engage in conversation, relationship. We're going to make it easy. We're going to put them up. We're going to put them in this junk drawer. We're going to put them in this sock drawer. We're going to have a basket up on the counter. Or every night, after a certain period of time, we're going to have a little charging station where all of our devices can be charging in one central location that's not around anybody specifically, and we can use that to help us. And look, some of these things um, are just temporary fixes. Really, it comes down to an attitude of the heart that we have to consider the ways that our phones are changing us. And in doing that, if we really think through these things, we need to make some changes. We need to be more focused on the Lord and eternality. Look, these can be great tools to build up, to communicate, to be avenues through which we do ministry and we help others and we get the word out about the gospel. And yet at the same time, these can be great tools to push us further away from the Lord. And so let's recognize those things. Let's understand that our phones are changing us. Ask ourselves the question, how is my phone changing me? Maybe some of the things we talked about tonight. And then what am I willing to do as a result of how I've considered these things so that I can make sure that this device is serving me and I'm not serving it. And under that, I'm serving the Lord. So hopefully these things have been helpful to you. Tune in next week to our last session in this seminar when we'll really get very, very practical. What does all this mean? How can we use wisdom to approach different sources of technology? Thanks. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.